But for right now, we will hand it over to Brian Storey with EPA to talk about lime manufacturing.
So I have no visuals, so this is going to be nice and dry. But we are doing making amendments to the Lime Manufacturing NESHAP. It's in 40 CFR Part 63, Subpart AAAA. It specifically regulates lime manufacturing plants where they're taking limestone out of the ground and exposing it to high temperatures and driving off the CO2, and the end product on the other side is pure lime. It's somewhat similar to a Portland cement process where they have kilns, rotary kilns, and the like. But they like to think that the lime manufacturing is a more pure industry than Portland cement, where Portland cement takes in, all kinds of raw materials, and in the lime manufacturing world, they're looking at the purest of pure materials in their production. At least that's the story they tell. So this rule was originally promulgated back in 2004, and at the time, the one emission standard that was included in 2004 was PM as a surrogate for non-mercury metals. It did not regulate mercury, HCl, or organic HAP. And they actually did a summer risk assessment at the time and determined that there were no adverse risks from HCl. And so at the time, the agency's policy was to, they decided that standards weren't necessary for HCl. In 2020, we did the residual risk and technology review, and found that risks were acceptable and made no changes to the standards. Again, we weren't regulating HCl, mercury, or some of these other pollutants. And then, of course, we had the lien decision. And if you're not familiar with the lien decision, it was a court decision that determined that if we had unregulated pollutants in a rule, that we were required to set standards for them. We couldn't not set standards based on some acceptable risks that we had determined. So we are going back now, and we luckily during the residual risk and technology review, we did a 114 request and collected emissions data from the industry. And so we have in-house emissions data on dioxin, furans, hydrogen chloride, THC or organic HAP, and mercury. And so what we're doing now is evaluation of the data and looking to set MACT standards where appropriate, and perhaps if it's necessary, beyond the floor controls. So we are in the process of validating the data, and actually are getting very close to being able to assess what the impacts are going to be for these UPL calculations that we're doing. For dioxin, furans, I'll just go through and just kind of talk about each of the pollutants and what we're finding, and some of the requests that the trade association has asked us to provide in this amendment here. But for dioxin, furans, most of the facilities that we have data on, the dioxin, furans, all the conjures associated with the dioxin, furans were below detection limit. A majority of the tests were below detection limit. We did have a few hits there. We do have at our discretion that if a majority of the emissions data shows that it's beyond the measurable capabilities of testing, that we could set work practice standards. And so unfortunately for this industry, we don't know what a work practice standard would look like. And so we're doing an evaluation to determine if there's something in the process for these facilities that had non-detects if there's something in the process that's a little bit different from the ones that actually had some indication of dioxin furan emissions, and we're trying to see if we can assess some difference in the process or operation that we could coincide. I mean, you know, tie into you know, some work practice that would guarantee compliance. So that dioxin furans is actually one of the simpler pollutants. Talk about mercury a little bit. So mercury comes from the raw material, and as you're digging through a quarry, you're cutting through, you know, periods of time, and depending on different factors that were going on with the, you know, atmosphere at the time, you get these various layers of mercury deposits within the raw materials. NLA, or the National Lime Association, is a trade association. So if you hear me say NLA, that's who I'm referring to. They've asked us to subcategorize mercury because they have two processes. They actually have three different stone types. One's a high calcium quicklime, the other is a dolomitic lime, and the third is a dead burn dolomitic lime. And basically the difference between those three types of stone produced is just a recipe difference. So it's how long they're keeping the residence time within the kiln of the raw materials, and so some of these stones produced actually stay in the kiln a little bit longer, and therefore the emissions are higher. And so we have been asked to subcategorize by these stone types, and what we have found is that the dead burn dolomitic lime has the high mercury emissions, and the quicklime and dolomitic lime production, the mercury emissions are relatively lower. And so we are going to attempt to subcategorize by stone type for mercury emissions. The other thing that the Trade Association has asked us to consider is inter-quarry variability. So when we do these, when we set MACT standards, we're doing a statistical analysis, and when we talk about the calculating the UPL, that's what we're talking about, is just a statistical analysis that takes into account some variability in the raw data. For Portland cement and for the brick rule, which are similar rules where you're taking raw materials from the earth, we also included an inter-quarry variability factor into our UPL calculations, and that takes into account this, you know, stratifying of different concentrations of mercury over time in the quarry, so that you know, whatever mercury is being dug up from the quarry now, or what our, you know, our emissions data that we have is based on what's being dug up now. And then you look down the road, like 20 years down the road, it could change slightly based on the mercury concentration of the quarry. And so in these rules where we have emissions dependent on raw materials, we've at our discretion, we've included this inter-quarry variability just to build in another factor. NLA has provided us with a quarry that's in our MACT floor pool, and so we have that data in-house, and we're evaluating it now to see what if it's valid, and if we can use the data to come up with this factor. The next pollutant I'll talk about is hydrogen chloride. Again, this is dependent on raw materials being burned in the kiln. And for this pollutant, NLA has asked for two subcategories. We've already subcategorized by stone type, as we did with mercury, but they've also asked us to subcategorized by kiln type. They have straight rotary kilns, which are similar to Portland cement kilns. They have preheater rotary kilns, and then they have vertical kilns. And each of these different kilns have different emissions profiles. And so the tricky part of this is that some of these kiln types switch products. And so they can be running one stone for 80% of the year, and then they switch over and run a different type of stone for 20% of the year. And so what we're trying to come up with here is a compliance, some sort of compliance that will cover them over a 5-year permit period. And what we're thinking about doing is requiring them to test each of the stone produced over a 5-year period. And if they let that 5-year period lapse, then they have to retest before they can start producing the stone that's out of hasn't been tested. That way, if they decide they need to run quicklime 100% of the time in 1 year, they can test for quicklime. But if they want to run dolomitic lime, they have to make sure that their dolomitic lime emissions testing is up to speed, or it has been done in the last 5-year window. And if not, then they have to test before being able to run that product. We've also been thinking about doing a time-weighted average, but from what we've been told by the industry, there's no guarantee that the previous year's production rates for the different stone produced would equate to what is required by the market in the current year. So we're trying to work that out so that it makes sense. I would say that of all the pollutants, the HCl is the most problematic as far as people being able to comply with the best performers. The emissions are all over the place, even with the subcategories. And so especially for like a straight rotary kiln that's producing quicklime, the data pool that we had for that subcategory was very large, but it was only the standards that we're calculating now are only being set by like maybe 2 facilities, 2 of the best performers. And so there's not a lot of variability there, and that tends to lend to people not being able to comply with a rule or having to put on controls. The last pollutant that we're looking to regulate is total hydrocarbons. The trade association has asked us for an OHAP limit instead. They feel that total hydrocarbons has a lot of interference with methane depending on the site location, and they think that an OHAP limit would be more appropriate. They've kind of leaned on the in Portland cement, there's an alternative OHAP limit, but it's very specific to 9 pollutants. And so the lime manufacturing industry has kind of leaned on those 9 pollutants. We kind of jokingly refer it to the Portland cement 9, but what we're finding when we review the THC data is that they have more OHAP than just the 9 that were selected for Portland cement. And so we're in the process. We've already calculated out what a THC limit would look like, and we're now evaluating what our OHAP limit, if we were to select an OHAP alternative limit, what pollutants we would specifically be targeting, and what that would look like. So those are the pollutants. We're behind on the schedule of this. We have a court ordered deadline for final signature of February 23rd, 2023. We don't have a proposed court order deadline, and that's dangerous because what we're finding is that what we thought, where we had robust data on all of these pollutants, that each one of these pollutants has their own peculiarities that have required more analysis than we anticipated, and we are way behind as far as trying to be able to finalize something in February of 2023. I've got a schedule, realistic schedule that has a proposed signature somewhere around July. But if I run into problems where it looks as though we're going to have to propose additional emissions controls, and if the costs of those controls get too high, then I'm going to have to, it will require that we have O&B review the package, and that it will push my schedule out. And so what we're hoping to do is that when we propose, we're hoping to be able to go back to the petitioners and ask them to relax the court order deadline for the final and perhaps give us additional time. And we've been talking with the petitioners, and they seem to have been they don't have a problem with that for one of the other rules that we're doing where we're running out of time. So we're hopeful that they will be they will allow us a little bit of extra time to do this. So we want to do it right, and so it's just that it's taking us a little bit longer on the data. But yeah, so I'm hoping to be able to propose something in July, but it's going to depend on whether or not we require an O&B review on the package or not. So that's what I have. Does anybody have any questions? Sorry, it's not bright and shiny as a air dispersion model demonstration, but
That's fine, Brian. We did have one question come up. In looking at these lime manufacturings, how many do you feel would be classified as small businesses, meaning less than 100 employees?
Yeah, so we've taken a quick look at that, and I think there was some indication that we did have a good number of small businesses here. I don't know the exact percentage to tell you the truth. We haven't really got that far into it yet. We've been so focused on validating this data and getting the standards calculated out so that we could get some guidance from our management on that we are focused heavily on that element right now. But now that we're getting into the rulemaking side of things, we are starting to assess this. We did do a demographic analysis, and to tell you the truth, I haven't seen the results of that yet to really be able to speak to it. But one has been done for this rule. So I apologize, I can't answer that question off the bat. I do know that we do have small businesses. There was, I wasn't the project lead on the RTR, but from what I've been told, there was a small business component to the RTR as well. So,
okay. Based on your general evaluations that you've done so far, do you have an idea about how many businesses might be there, and are they more concentrated in certain areas of the country than others?
Well, I don't think there's like one centralized location in the country. It's really kind of like Portland cement. It's where you can find a good quarry of limestone, and so there's not a lot of transporting of raw materials to these sites. They're typically located where the rocks are, or where they're able to get the raw materials, and so it's all over the place. We've got some facilities. Well, I mean, they're just all over the place. And let's see, what was the second part of that question?
About how many of them are there?
I think the last count was something close to like 65 to 80 facilities. And for some odd reason, what sticks out of my head is there was something like 5, I want to say, small businesses. So I'm not sure what that percentage works out, but don't quote me on those numbers. I'm just kind of pulling them out off the top of my head here from what I remember from our initial conversation on it. But
Okay, very understandable. Okay. So do we have any further questions for Brian or Julia or Matt? Okay, seeing none, we certainly appreciate you all joining us today, and thank you, Rhonda, for helping us get connected with them. Next month, we will not have a technical subcommittee meeting because we'll be in the middle of annual training, which will be going on every Thursday in May. If you have not already registered for that, please do so, because similar to the last year when we did it online, we are having registration so that Allison in particular will be sending out the link invites so that you can join in on the training on those days. But sort of falling on the heels of today's topic, June 15th will be our next technical subcommittee meeting, where we will be discussing air toxics evaluations and air permitting from the Michigan EGLE. I keep forgetting exactly what that stands for. It's something like Environment Greater Lakes. So, and then sort of also related to today's topic is July 19th, we will be having a presentation from Noel Anderson on Google Earth and GIS. So look at more mapping ideas and how to graphically find businesses or how pollution goes and similar to that. I will also, while we're here at a technical call, put out the request if anybody wants to step up and become co-chair with Mark, please let Mark or myself know and let us know fairly soon. I am going to have to be stepping down from that position. So don't want to leave Mark alone, especially for days like today when he has something else going on and the co-chair has to step in. So any final thoughts or questions? Okay, hearing none. Once again, I appreciate all the EPA speakers today and the questions from the group. And we shall see you in May for the annual training.